dress design I'm going for today is a fitted halter neck dress that has a side slit on the front, a zip on the center back, and is somewhat of a sweetheart neckline. Now the length of this dress is about midi length, so it is above my knee, but you have the freedom to change up your design however you want to. Now once I was done sketching out my design and I knew how many seams and type of fabric I was using, I took down my measurements, and these are the measurements you're going to be needing. If you don't know how to take your measurements, I have a video where I show you how to take your body measurements using measuring tape or by yourself. I'm going to link down below and on the screen, so you check that out if you don't know how taking your measurement works. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the materials I'm working with. The main fabric I'm using is this metallic stretch jersey, and it's really nice and thick, so I would not be lining this dress. I ended up using about 1.5 meters for this dress. It didn't need a lot of fabric because the material was very wide to start with. After that, you also be needing a few other things to put this dress together. The other thing I grabbed was some black plastic boning because I added boning around the waist to really snatch it into the body for more structure and definition. Side along with boning, I also got a black invisible zip to put on the center back of the dress, so that is how I get in and out of the dress. Aside from a zip, I also got myself some black bias tape, which will help me create the tunnels for the boning along the waistline of the dress. Now that I have all of my materials, I'm going to set them to the side and start working on the patterns. The dress has a total of 4 patterns, 2 for the front and 2 for the back, and I'm going to start off with making the front dress plan, which will help me create the back patterns as well. Now I have a long piece of paper here like so, and the first thing I'm doing is drawing a short horizontal line, which will become my shoulder line on top of the paper. Now I'm just marking the vertical distance from my shoulder to my bust and from my bust to my waist. Mine is 10 inches from my shoulder to my bust and 6 inches from my bust to my waist, and I highly recommend you work with yours for the best outcome. I found that the distance from my bust to my waist is actually quite small, and I know people who have longer torsos, so please work with yours for the best outcome. Now I'm just going in here to square those points across so to help me plan the bust line and the waistline of this dress. The next thing I'm doing in here is marking the vertical distance from my waist to my hip. Mine is 10 inches, and I'm squaring the point across like so, as you can see here. And along my bust line, I am marking 1/4 of my bust measurement minus 1/2 inch. That 1/2 inch minus is because the fabric has stretch and you want to give it room to stretch across the body. Along that edge, I have lifted it up by 1 inch, which is going to become the bottom of my arm curve. Now along my waistline, I'm marking 1/4 of my waist measurement plus 1 inch, which will help me create the waist start of the dress. And along the hip, I marked 1/4 of my hip measurement minus 1/2 inch. Here I'm just going into drawing the side seam of the dress, which connects the bust to the waist and the waist to the hip, and it's a curved line that helps you to join the front to the back of the garment. Now I'm just going to draw in the neckline of the dress, but before I do that, I am marking 3 inches above my bust line, and I do that so I know the neckline is wide enough to actually cover my bust, and it's a shape that dips on the side up the bust area and down to the center front. I like to do necklines that are curved by hand first. I just found that it gives me a lot more freedom, and once I'm happy with the shape, I will go back in and refine the lines using my pattern master. You can do this with a pencil first if you are afraid of committing with a marker pen. Here I'm just marking half of my nipple to nipple measurement along the bust line, and I'm drawing a vertical line that cuts across that half nipple point. Along that vertical line, we're going to be planning in our waist dart. Now I'm marking 1 inch away along the waistline, and I'm going to be drawing in the dart shape that typically would go from widest to a point along the bust and around the hip, and this you would need to draw towards the bust and towards the hip. Now the dart ends roughly 1 inch before your hip line, and it goes into your bust point, and this would help to shape the garment on your body. Along the neckline, I'm taking away 1 inch on both sides. I found that doing this just helps or prevents the garment from gaping along the neckline, whether it's a sweetheart or a square neckline. It just helps for a better fit. Now once I had that drawn in place, I lifted up the front panel to match the side panel, because the curve goes in such a way that one side would end up being shorter than the other, hence why I'm lifting it. So when you cut these pieces out and you stitch them together, they actually match along the top of the neckline. Now I'm just marking my dress length, which is 50 inches, so it goes like midi length. You can have your shorter or longer to your desired length. Once I had that marked in place, I'm going in here to square the dress hemline across like so, and then the dress hem width is 77 inches, so I have the really nice fitted silhouette on the body. After joining the side seam connecting the hip to the hem, I'm extending that half nipple point vertical line downwards, so that helps me to divide the front dress plan into two obvious panels, panel 1 and panel 2. And panel 1 you need to cut on a fold on the front. So this is what the dress plan looks like. This I've made with my measurement, and I highly recommend you make yours with your measurements so you have a better fit. The neckline is quite deep and it goes below the bust point, but you can play around with the fit of that if you want to. And I'm going to be using my front plan to create my back plan, and I'm just adding some paper over the front plan like so. Add some weight to keep it in place, and the back plan is different along the neckline especially. So the back neckline dips from the side towards the center back, sort of like a concave shape that goes straight around the middle. I'm also going to be adding a center back dart that would prevent the zip or the center back from making weird folds when I have the dress on. That I would curve back out to the hip and to the center back seam, which is where I'm going to be putting my zip. I'm also going to be tracing off the hemline, the side seam, the dart, and that middle seam that divides the dress plan into two obvious panels. Now this is a front and the back dress plan. They both have two panels each, and the dart and that middle seam is what helps to create the division, and which will also help to shape the dress, especially around the waistline. So now that we have the plans done, you would need to trace off each panel to be able to cut onto fabric and stitch all together. Now for the center front of the dress, you need to trace around that front edge, but only add seam allowance around where the dart is. The center front is going to be cut in a fold, so you have one piece that goes across the middle of the front of the dress. You also need to trace off the back patterns as well. Now the first pattern here I have is my center front panel, which is half of my neckline, half of the front. I also have the second panel for my front, and I marked where I want my slit to end on the pattern. It was roughly 15 to 20 inches above the hemline. You can have yours longer or shorter if you want. I also went in to trace off my back dress patterns. I added a seam allowance all the way around as well as along the hem. The hem has a 2 centimeters or 1 inch hem allowance, and then the seam allowance is 1 centimeter or half an inch, depending on how much you like to work with. So these are all of the patterns I ended up creating. It's also a 4, so it's actually not that difficult to make the patterns of this dress design. It's been a long day, but we're making progress. I am done creating all of the patterns and I've pinned them down onto the fabric. I ended up using about 1.5 meters, not even up to 1.5 meters. I'll say like 1.2, 1.3 meters to cut the dress. Because the fabric I'm using is quite wide, I could fit all the patterns like in one go. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so this is what I mean. I was able to fit all of the patterns across the fabric like this. And this edge here is folded, so the wrong side of this fabric is plain black. So I know if I overlock the edges of the fabric with black thread, that would be a great way to finish off the seams on the inside. But I'm just going to quickly grab my scissors and cut out all of the pieces that I need for this super sexy, super gorgeous dress. So I'm just going to go in and cut off all the panels I need for the dress, for the front or for the back as well. I also went ahead to add notches along the waistline, the hip line, and any other points that would help me when it's time to stitch it together. After that, I overlocked the edges of all the panels so I had everything ready to sew in place. So I have cut out all of the panels for the dress and overlocked the edges as well. So I have my middle front, the side of the front, which I have 2 pieces for. I have my back panels and I have a pair each for them. I just went to overlock all the edges, so once I join them together, I don't need to worry about what the seam looks like on the inside because I will not be lining this dress. The fabric is actually quite thick, but for a lining panel or lining layer, you can just use the same pattern and cut the lining in a lighter fabric if you don't want to have any seam showing at all on the inside. The plan is to join everything up together and then along the seams add the boning tunnels along the waistline alone. But first, let's join these together and I will show you guys my progress as I go along. So I've gone ahead to pin all of the panels together for the front to the back, and I pinned it in such a way that once I'm done with one seam, I can just go ahead to work on the other seam. I also marked where I want my slit to be because I need to stop my stitch there along that front seam, and I'm just going to go in to sew all of the panels on a 1 centimeter seam allowance on my domestic machine. Once I had all of them stitched in place, I took this to my iron and I ironed the seams open because that would actually help me when it's time to add the bias tape, which will help me make the boning tunnels along the waistline of this dress. I also pinned the slit seam sideways, and this I just need to stitch along all the way around that seam opening to have it nice and flat on the front of the dress. Now I'm just going in here to sew that seam opening like so, and because I've already overlocked the edge of this panel, I just need to sew it close to the edge at an even seam allowance on both sides. When I get to the top, just turn my garment in the other direction, leaving the needle in, and then just work my way down to the end of this side of the seam opening. This is a quick and easy way to make seams on garments, especially if they don't have lining. Now next up, I'm going to be adding the zip to the center back of the dress, which is open, and I'm working with this black invisible dress zip, which I am going to be first of all pinning in place. Especially when I work with stretchy fabrics, I like to pin the zip down because you don't want to stretch the fabric across the zip and have bubbles in places you don't want it to. So once I had the zip pinned on both sides open like this, I took it to my machine and I'm going to be sewing the zip into the center back of the dress using a slim zip footer. With invisible zips, you want to unfold it gradually as you sew, and I have a separate video where I show how to actually fix invisible zips into garments. Once I was done stitching the zip on both sides, I'm going to be going in to close off the bottom of the center back seam, and I'm going to sew from the hem all the way to the bottom edge of the zip, so that way there is no opening on the center back of the dress. Now once I was done stitching this, I put it on just to check for the fit. Alright, so I have popped on the dress and this is what it fits like. It's actually quite comfortable. It's actually a very nice and comfortable fit. Inside I have worn a strapless bra, and I think once I add the shoulder straps that would tie behind my neck, it would help to really secure the neckline of the dress. I'm glad I didn't go any deeper because that is just where the bra strap is. So if it was any deeper, you'd have been seeing the bra there. The length I wish I made a little bit longer. I wish it was just like, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches longer, but this I'm not mad at this. The slit is a good fit as well. Thank God I didn't go any higher than that, but this is the fit of the dress. Ooh, this is so nice. And this one you cannot have big dinner, because if you have a food belly, it would definitely show. That's the fit from the back. Looks really good as well. I'm going to finish off the the neckline, add the shoulder straps, and finish off the hemline of the dress to complete the look. To create the boning tunnels, I cut black bias tape that measured roughly 7 inches for the back seam, and I've pinned them in such a way that I'm going to be sewing along the sides, so it creates a tunnel or opening in the middle where I would put the bias, where I would put the boning through, correction. So this I did on the front and on the back, and once I was done stitching all of them down, I went in to pass the boning into the tunnel that I left in the middle. I closed off the top of the tunnel so the boning would not escape, and after putting all of the bonings in, I took this to my machine and I'm going to be sewing the bottom of the tunnel closed so that keeps the boning on the inside of the garment. This I did for the 2 seams on the back and for the 2 seams on the front. Now I'm just going to go ahead to finish the neckline of the dress, and I'm using bias tape to do so. Now I've pinned one edge of the bias tape open along the neckline of the dress from one side to the other. I folded the beginning and the end of the bias tape, and I'm going to be sewing first across like this on a 1 centimeter seam allowance, around the back, around the front neckline, and then I'm going to be using this same tape to hide or conceal the seam by folding it over and then top stitching it on the inside of the neckline. Now this is a very quick and easy way to finish off necklines if you don't have a lining and you want like a tidy finished neckline of a dress that is sort of this style. Now I'm just going in here to finish off this particular side of the bias binding and neckline seam, and once I was doing that, I went ahead to fold the bias binding over twice on the inside. So once I stitch along this edge on the inside of the garment, it helps me to conceal the seam and it helps to finish the neckline of the dress. This is a bit challenging to do because you want to get a seam that is nice and even, because it's going to show on the outside of the dress along the neckline, which is the first thing people see when they look at you wearing this dress. So just take your time doing this particular step. I'm usually very slow when I do this because I want it to come out as tidy and as neat as possible. Now this is what the neckline of the dress looks like on the inside, and if you don't even want to add straps, you could possibly wear the dress like this. I would just recommend adding those sticky elastic bits to prevent it from rolling down as you wear it over time. Now the last thing I did here was to cut some straps which measured roughly 33.5 inches length, and I'm closing them off on the open side like so, because they are bias tape which are normally open, but I closed off the edges first, folded down one side, and I'm going to be sewing it into the neckline of the dress. I'm just sewing it on top of that seam where we joined the 2 front panels together. I'm just adding some pins here, and I'm going to be trying to stitch it along that exact neckline seam that helped us to finish it off with the bias tape. Now I'm going to take this to my machine, and this you can even hand stitch if you feel the pressure to knot that and get that stitch. You can just do this by hand. And the last step we're going to be doing is to finish off the hemline of the dress. First off, I'm overlocking the hemline across like this. After overlocking, I took this to my machine and I folded it inwards by a centimeter hem allowance, and I'm just stitching it from one side to the other side to finish off the dress. After I was done doing that, I gave my dress a nice press to relax all of the seams, and this is what the final piece looked like. I think the greatest compliment was when I wore this and my husband asked me, "Did you make that dress?" It like expecting me to say no, I bought it, and I was like, you know what, I actually made it. And it turned out so cool and so nice. The one thing I would change is I would probably stitch the shoulder strap a bit closer to the neckline, because if you look closely you can see that the strap pulls the dress in such a way that the neckline opens up a bit. It doesn't look bad, but I think that's the only thing I would change with the fit of this dress. Aside that, everything else turned out really cool. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you have any other suggestions or ideas, don't forget to share them down below as well. And until my next video, have a good morning, afternoon and evening wherever you are. Bye.